This morning, we are continuing the 16 days of activism against gender-based violence, and the theme this year is uniting and investing against sexual and gender-based violence. With me in studio, we have Arthur Kwemba, Executive Director, African Women and Child Feature Service, Jackie Mbogo, Chief of Party Reinvent Program. We also have online, joining us virtually from the coast, Violet Muthiga, who is the CEO, Sauti ya Wanawake Pwani, and Elizabeth Mkongo, who is a gender champion, and she'll be giving she has first-hand knowledge. She works in these communities of the impact these programs have. So this is what we'll be discussing. But Arthur, just your general thoughts on the headlines across the dailies this morning.
Thank you, Olive, for having me on this morning show and to discuss some of the most important issues, particularly the issue around investing in ending violence against women and girls. But some of the things that are captured in the newspaper, they are the very bottlenecks to increased investment in fighting for the rights of women and girls. What I've always wondered in this country, whenever a new government comes to power, the first 2 years, scandals start brewing. And getting into government is seen as a pathway to enriching yourself in a very quick way. And I don't know what we'll do as Kenyans in terms of stopping this. So it's an issue the media needs to keep its eyeball on it, to do continuous stories. These are just evolving stories. We need to inform Kenyans. We need Kenyans to come out and condemn and advocate very strongly against corruption, because some of the current situation we're in, high cost of living, is partly to blame, because studies have shown corruption is at the heart, in many countries, at the heart of high cost of living. It's a mongrel. Corruption wants to eat, and where does it eat from? It has to take from the people. So this is something we need. I think agencies are tasked to fight corruption in Kenya, EACC and others, to move with speed and investigate and ensure that justice is done, especially for the Kenyan person. Mm-hmm. Yeah. The other important issue today is the floods. First, my condolences to the families who have lost their loved ones due to the floods. And it just tells us as a country is we speak a lot and we don't act, because floods is not the first time. These are things go back to over 40 years, and there are measures, reports have been done, studies, how to help manage those floods. But still, every year when we have flooding, we get similar negative results. And we need as a country also to pause and think why other countries are doing very well. We are in a similar situation like us. So I think for me is an issue of taking action to many recommendations that were made than forming new committees to come up with new recommendations, because we have very beautiful recommendations that have been made over the years on how to deal with the problem. On the issue of the report that has just been released, where the two principals, both Raila Odinga and President William Ruto, have indicated that they are part of the contents of those reports, especially the Azimio that they will support. And I think some of the issues, indeed, I was reading some of the issues, and you go back to IPPG, you look at the IBB, the bridging BBI, you look at the BBI, some of the issues, and scholars and legal minds have indeed indicated that they will require a referendum. I just don't know how we'll go about that given the state of affairs of the economy. So it's a big issue. Indeed, we are at crossroads as a country. And I think moving forward, we need to continue the struggle. Kenyans need to demand for better from the political leadership. Yes, and I think one of the biggest cries of Kenyans is cost of living. And I think the leaders need still to sit down. This is not the end of it. They need to sit down and address the cost of living because it's impacting so negatively on Kenyans. Lastly, is I'm really surprised with the report in the Business Daily on the increased car imports. You know, you wonder when the economy is doing and people are really crying and the car imports are going up, the dollar is very high. I thought it will, the whole idea of a foreign currency, you know, being devalued like our shillings is to stop importation and encourage exportation. But we are seeing the reverse here. And I'm just wondering, is it that some people, we think we don't have money, but the other people
actually say money. Speak for yourself.
Yeah, speak for yourself. Don't speak for everyone.
Exactly.
Yeah, it just tells you that speak for yourself. Let other people speak for themselves. So I think in a nutshell, for me, that will be an important issues that newspapers need to look out, and Kenyans need to demand for their rights on many of these specific, be it floods. They need to demand their rights from the county and national governments to invest more in measures that mitigate these floods, and also to demand more on their on the cost of living, so that the government really acts on its pledges, how it promised. So I think that's very key, because when we go on the ground, we work with people at the grassroots. You go to the grassroots, that is the cry. And you see, this high cost of living, in some families, if you talk to, there's a massive demand on the providers within families. And in one way, it's not a justification, but in one way it has been shown, when cost of living is very high, the people who suffer most, especially from violence, are women and girls. Yes.
That is what the COVID-19 pandemic demonstrated.
Yes.
Yeah. So thank you for bringing us back, full circle back to where we were headed. So we are going to take a break and we'll come back with this conversation. On the other side, hiyo mambo mengine ya siasa, national dialogue, nini, kesho asubuhi. As I so usually on Friday mornings, I host a youthful panel. So we will interrogate those matters you have raised deeper. But the agenda for this morning: unite, invest against SGBV. All right, as I mentioned before we took the break, we are looking at uniting and investing in the prevention of sexual and gender-based violence. That is the theme of this year's 16 Days of Activism Against Gender-Based Violence. Before you got here, Jackie, I was asking, Chief of Party, what does that mean?
This is a person that leads a program. In this case, I lead the Reinvent program, which is a UK aid-funded program on peace and security in Kenya.
Yes. Actually, Reinvent stands for
Reducing Violent Extremism in Northern Kenya. Yes. However, we go beyond Northern Kenya. We actually cover 18 counties clustered around the coast region, the northeast region of Kenya, the Rift Valley parts of Kenya, western Kenya, and now we are also in Central and Eastern Kenya, because the issues we are discussing today are not specific to a region. Peace and security, you cannot say peace and security is only specific to a certain region. So whilst we concentrate on those regions that are very vulnerable, we recognize that this is an issue that is pervasive across the nation, and therefore we reach out to as many parts of the country as we can.
Western Kenya?
Yes, we do.
So what are some of the programs you have there?
So,
sorry, I know I'm being a nosy Nelly, but
so in Western Kenya, we actually have mitigation of violence against women and girls. We do peace building. We also engage on police reform. And you know, police is across the nation. It's a national function. So anywhere where we have issues of violence that is to do with criminal violence, SGBV related violence, intercommunal conflicts, we have violence extremism in the country. So all those parts of Kenya will be areas that are prime for Reinvent program.
And some of what came up, because I was on both your websites. Yes. Sorry, one quick second. You had, you know, like, what is it called? Like bullet points type highlights of the programs that you actually support across the country in this area. But some of what I'm hearing Jackie say, Arthur, and I was also on your website. In fact, on the Reinvent website, you are quoted as one of the success stories, that there's actually a study you did on the relation between conflict and SGBV. So in this space, there's research that is needed, is what I understood from some of the content that was on your website. But first, what I'm hearing is that this is not an issue, the prevention of SGBV, that is a how do I phrase it? One bullet approach, forgive the choice of phrase, but it needs a multi-sectoral approach. So you have to look at issues of peace and security. You need to address issues of education. You need to address issues of financial inclusion. You need to address, so it's a healthcare, right? Right to healthcare. So do you agree that the best way to address that, it is proven that this is the most productive way, efficient, effective way to prevent SGBV, is to address it from all these sides, so to speak?
Yes, I totally agree with that. This is a multi-dimensional issue.
Thank you. I was struggling. A neutral word, yes.
It's a multi-dimensional issue. For effective approach to addressing GBV, you have to use that. And this was a recognition that was made long way. In fact, we are just too late in terms of integration. It started in 1984 in Kenya here, during the forward-looking strategy where women came together to discuss issues, and they started advocating for that. And I think by then many people are not listening. And then we came to 1995. Now the formalization of those conversations in the Beijing, the famous Beijing of 1995. And if you look at the 12 points in the Beijing document, they speak keenly to those issues. Each area, we have an area on education, we have an area on health, we have an area on human rights, we have an area on poverty. And in each area, there is a clarion call that you need to integrate these issues to reduce violence. And if you look at most women who are in very violent situations, there are usually certain attributes about them. We know even wealthy or women who are in middle or upper class, they're also experiencing violence. It's only they are not as vocal, it doesn't come out. But if you look at most women who experience violence and counties that have been shown to experience a lot of violence, there is a positive correlation in terms of education of that woman, poverty levels in those counties, access to health in those counties. So for this woman to be empowered, to be able to be empowered both economically and also to know her rights, you have to bring all these players together. You have to bring the guys who are operating in terms of reduction of poverty and access to livelihoods. You have to bring people in health. For instance, if she has suffered violence, where does she seek? And is that access to that health provider cheap and accessible? If a woman wants to get into livelihood, is it accessible? For instance, I think we'll be discussing that. The government has a policy. There are various policies on how you integrate women into development. The 30% quota, you have heard it, that it has to be set aside both at national and county level to women and youth. Are women who really need it accessing it? So it's, and this is a realization that an empowered woman, a woman who is very empowered, there is a very positive correlation within an empowering women and reducing violence. So if an empowered woman, also there is a negative correlation. If a woman is disempowered, you see there's also a lot of violation. Just remember, as I finalize on that, disempowerment makes you voiceless. It makes you can't fight for your rights. So the starting point is to empower women. And how do you empower them? By looking at all these actors to come together, not work in silos, and to agree that Olive is here, her problems are this. She has educational problems, she has livelihood problems, she has certain rights being violated. How do we help her? So if I come in as Arthur with just to educate that woman and create awareness about her rights, then she will ask me, after this, what next? I need to refer her to another institution that will take over from me to engage her in a livelihood program. Then I need another institution that if she has been violated, that will be able to take her on the pathway towards accessing justice. So you can see integration is critical. We have to work as a team to ensure that those rights are respected. Sorry for speaking. No, clearly,
I knew that this is an area you all feel strongly about. But Violet, I'd like you to come in at this point. There are those who would take the view that ini mambo ya watu wawili, ini mambo ya boma, ini mambo yani mnakaa chini kama familia, mnazungumzia. Why should the wider society care what happens in your household?
Thank you very much, Oliver. And thank you for your question. My name is Violet. I work for Sauti ya Wanawake Pwani. For us as an organization, we look at violence in a personal space and a public space. And the personal space is what Olive is alluding to, like hii ni mambo ya watu wawili tumalizane. But what we need to think about, is this a violation of human rights? If it is a violation of human rights that consequently can lead to death, can lead to harming children in the process, can lead to disability, because we have seen examples of couples hacking each other. If, again, it can lead to emotional torture, and if, again, it is leading to another human being, either male or female, not enjoying their rights, then it's a violation of a right and it needs to be addressed, whether it is happening in a private space or a public space. So bottom line, for us as Sauti, it's a violation of rights. And what I want to add is that the nature of SGBV, or the nature of issues around gender-based violence, majority of them happen in a private space. And this is why we need to intervene in terms of prevention through awareness. So Sauti ya Wanawake main agenda is to ensure that we are creating awareness within the community for both boys and girls, for both women and men, to ensure that everybody is preventing gender-based violence and ensuring when it happens, then what is supposed to happen within the community level. So coordination, the way Arthur is just alluding to it, is very critical in ensuring prevention of gender-based violence, response. If a case already has happened, then there needs to be a survivor-centered approach in ensuring that the referral pathway for this survivor is sensitive, it is confidential, and it's putting the needs of the survivor at the center. So domestic violence intimate partner violence is very skyrocketing. And as a country, we can be able to ignore and say that this is mambo yao. There's nothing like mambo yao. Because remember, this is a population that is supposed to participate in developmental processes in this country. So if you have people who are in one way affected mentally or physically, then development then is impeded. Then there's the other issue of response that needs to be strengthened. There's a lot of efforts within the community that I work in that we've been able to put in place. Some of this is part of the coordination. For example, the technical gender working group that is at the national level, then it has been devolved at the county level. This is where we have all actors, and the county commissioner is the lead at this level, to be able to bring all actors addressing gender-based violence or working on women and girls' rights at the community level to coordinate and to be able to ensure that prevention is being given a priority. Because the key thing is that if we can prevent it, the better. But when it happens, then what happens to the survivor? And this is where now we allude to a multi-sectoral approach, where we have the legal department, where it looks at the access to justice of the survivor, ensuring that the evidence is taken in court in the proper manner, in a timely manner. This is where we have the investigating officers taking statements from the survivors and from the witnesses and making sure that the case is watertight. The survivor also has to access health facilities where within the 72-hour, we usually say the sooner at the community level, so we say the sooner the better, so that we are able to ensure that they have the PEP, they've been done counseling. If there is any complication in terms of their health, reproductive health care is taken care of at the community level, at a referral hospital within the community level. So for Mombasa, we normally use the Coast General, where they have the SGBV Center, and the community women have already been empowered to know, where do I go? I start at the health facility and ensure the survivor gets the help that she requires and continuous counseling. And even at the GBVRCs, where we have the PRC, the post-rep care forms that are filled to ensure that the survivor gets the needs and the wants that they would want. Then the next pathway that we talk about, we move to the police, where we have safety and security components. So the police are supposed to ensure that the survivor is not being threatened by anybody, and this is where witness protection comes in. And this is the ideal picture that should happen. So the police ensures the survivor is being taken care of, their evidence is being taken, their statements is being taken, and that they are safe within that environment. The children department comes in to ensure that if the child needs a safety nest, then they're able to do the documentation, and the child, if it's a child, they're taken to a rescue center where they're put there for some time as investigations and as the processes of supporting the survivors are ongoing, in terms of counseling, in terms of medical care, and in terms even of heading to court. Okay. We have a lot of improvement in terms of cases in court. So,
Violet, sorry, we'll come back to that in terms of the progress we are making where this is concerned. But when you were speaking and Violet was speaking, Arthur, it reminded me of a lady we met in Kibra. So this was, I think, about 2-3 years ago. Also 16 days of activism against SGBV. And so it was a town hall. And these women came, and a woman stood up and she said, my husband abuses me. But where do I go? Because she cannot read, she cannot write. She depends, even for her M-Pesa transactions, she depends on him. So whatever money she makes, and a lot of transactions now are done through mobile money. She's not sure whether it's still on her phone, whether he took some of it. And so she was like, and she said she had tried adult education programs. She was struggling. So she was like, okay, so what do I do? Where do I go? So clearly, I think for me, her case illustrates why she talked about the referral pathway, why this is important. Jackie, do you have something to add to that?
Yes, I'll circle back to what Arthur said about the indices or the indicators that we experience as a nation. You see, we cannot achieve development, meaningful development, unless we tackle violence. Because the cost of curing violence is really significant, especially to the public health sector, because when you're violated, public money has to be spent. Now, when we talk about public versus private, the fact is, even if it's intimate partner violence, it's got to find its way to a hospital. That is public resource that is going to be used. It has to find its way to a police station. That is public resource that we are using. So then we have to care to prevent it so that we stop the drain on public resource in terms of responding to injury that results from violence. Now, again, when you look at the indicators for development, no country that has high indicators for violence against women and girls in particular achieves indicators for human development. So high infant mortality will be a result of this. You'll experience a lot of mortality across all demographics. You're going to have very low indicators for education and health, just to name a few. Then you've got even the indicators on gross happiness, because you cannot experience happiness if violence is happening. Now, if I go to the woman then you're talking about, the reality is the disempowerment, the fact that one, she cannot read or write, already places her in a very vulnerable situation. She cannot negotiate out of this. She cannot even hold this person to account. And that's why we are saying domestic violence, intimate partner violence, is one of the most damaging aspects of violence that the country needs to take cognizance of and provide opportunities for redress, opportunities to prevent, but also opportunity for care. So such a woman, for instance, needs to know that there are pathways that she can approach. She can go to a gender technical working group, because now we have a lot of formations, even at the village level, where women and men come together and begin to deliberate pathways where victims and survivors of violence can actually get redress. Once she gets into these spaces, she then enters into the pathway, and the pathway then takes her to the police to the health center, and on until she can access justice. Where violence is such that she needs removal, one of the big areas as a country we need to look at is safe spaces. For this kind of a woman, remember, she's living with her violator every day. She's disempowered because he's even holding the instruments of empowerment, such as resource. So how can this woman get out? She can only get out if she knows there's a safe space. Unfortunately, the investment on safe spaces is not as robust as would be. But if we had more of shelters for persons that have been violated, then such a woman would easily go to that shelter, get a safe space to be able to then get access to all these services. But if she's going to get these services and she still has to go back to her violator, one of the things that then the woman is likely to experience is fear and intimidation. And that is what Violet was saying, that the role of the police comes in to be able to even protect the survivor, to be able to deal with the perpetrator, because even removal of the perpetrator is important where we cannot keep the woman safe or where she's not willing, because again, she's got to be willing to enter into a safe space. Where she's not willing, then the alternative is to remove the perpetrator, and put restraining orders so that the perpetrator does not continue to violate, and that this space the woman has is not toxified in a manner that intimidates her from getting the services she needs. If we are able to circle that, and that is what we call a survivor-centered approach, where you begin to say, what would a survivor need? What are the services that enable someone to recover and be resilient enough to go back to living their life in a manner that she thrives in her life? So survivor-centeredness is one principle that through this program we keep advocating for, and I'm very glad to note that the government is also robustly picking up the issue of a survivor-centered approach, because it enables us to then ring-fence all the services, and that goes to the jointedness we're talking about, where you ring-fence all services around a survivor and ask, what would a survivor need? What would a pathway look like that is enabling and empowering for a survivor? And once you get that right, then survivors enter into that space with the confidence they need, because again, attrition happens when people don't think they can get the services. When people think these services are not, they are defective, they are too expensive, I cannot access them, or they are speaking the language I don't speak. For a woman who has not perhaps had formal education, she's likely to fear that they are going to speak English and I don't speak it. So when you're survivor-centered, you begin to think, if it's a woman who has not had a formal education, what is the best language? If it's a woman with disability, or even a man, because violence is not just specific to women. If a child has been violated, and they are a child with disability, what services can we give that then this child, this man, this woman begins to feel surrounded with care, and care that responds to their need? So once we score that, you find that then people stay on, they seek services, and they come back more empowered, which is a benefit to the economy, which is also a benefit to development, because our development index then shoots up where violence has been eradicated. Yeah,
yeah, you make very good points, and I mean, what we're talking about here, SGBV, cuts across not just intimate partner violence, FGM, even online harassment. So it covers a significant area. And at least thanks for bringing the point of the economy home, that this will ultimately affect your pocket, whether you feel that this is no concern of yours or not. But Arthur, for many people, you know, they imagine that this stops at access to justice, medical intervention, and be on your way. But even where access to justice is concerned, if somebody is getting prosecuted, then the court process can be a lengthy one, although there are reforms that are being undertaken in the judiciary. This violator has a right to bail. So you're asking somebody who is dependent on this person, first of all, right? Because I hosted female judges and magistrates, and they said many times you have a woman who has been, or a woman with a child who has been violated. They come to court and they are unwilling to testify because they're dependent on the violator financially. So, I mean, does it then again underscore the need of, this cannot just end at the police station, this cannot just end with medical intervention and be on your way? Yes,
I totally agree, and I just want to pick from on the issue that has been raised by colleagues Jackie and Violet. First, when you look at integration and the issue you are raising in terms of this woman who feels very vulnerable, and they have to do, is a balancing act for them. I've been violated, and what about my livelihood and my children? And the person who is at the center of providing that livelihood is the perpetrator. How do I balance the two? And if you look at integration, that's why we are really saying the heart of this is integration. Is integration at various levels. So we need very effective integration at preventive level, where you bring actors, including media, to create advocacy and awareness around these issues. You need other experts to do research around these issues, because the argument has been, do we have enough data to argue to government to put more resources in addressing the issue arising of that woman? We have integration at management level, how now you are managing SGBV, and those issues of access to justice comes out there. The woman has been violated, she's a survivor. She needs to access justice, but not just justice. When she's accessing justice, is she able to be away in a safe space from that? And also the other thing is she able to access that justice? Remember, accessing justice is very expensive in this country. Who comes in to help her? So there is that level of integration. I think we'll be going deeper in that as we move on. Then there's integration at policy and program level, both at national and county level. The county governments, if you look at gender equality, the sessional paper on gender equality and development, if you look at Public Finance Management Act, if you look at even the SDGs, which the government has committed to implement in Kenya, if you look at all those frameworks, they are speaking about how do you help this woman on the issues of sexual violence. So, for instance, what Jackie was saying, there is little investment in rescue centers and shelters. And you'll be surprised, out of the 47 counties in Kenya, only 18 have rescue and shelter centers. only 18, 29 don't have. And in those 29, you'll find women are being violated. I think we need to ask ourselves, the push to have shelters has been one of the issues that has been pushed with both civil society and government. But why our counties, 29 counties, do not have shelters where women can run to? And then that's one of the things, investing in shelters. It remains a big gap. The second thing you asked about is, now this woman has been violated, she's seeking justice. First, if you look at the referral pathway, you have to report to the police. Sometimes the police station is far. Then you have to go to a health center. The case is taken to court. You have to go several times to court. The perpetrator has disappeared, perhaps. You are in court, they are looking for the perpetrator. But the perpetrator and the family and the ecosystem you are working in, they are coming to threaten you. Yeah? So if you continue with this case, this will happen to you or to your family and your children. So one, she doesn't have the financial muscle to go. The family and the supportive system is not there. And then the other challenge will be, she doesn't have somewhere to run to. So you go to court, you come back at home. That perpetrator sneaks in at night and tells you, I heard what you said in court. You see me. So those are some of the biggest challenges we need to address. And it's not, shelters are not all bulletproof, but we need to come up with beyond even shelters, what other arrangements do you need to put in place? For instance, if you have one shelter, rescue center, let's say in a county like the 4 counties in last year, the Kenya Demographic Health Survey showed that at least over 35% of women, no, I think 34% of women have been experienced physical violence and 13% sexual violence. And the counties that were leading, I think in Western was Bungoma, in Central was Murang'a and Embu, and in Nyanza was Homa Bay, with over 20%. One of them is over, I think Bungoma is 34. But if you look in those counties where you have 34 of the women reporting violations, do they have shelters? And if they have, how many? Is that county investing? Is that county being guided by data?
You've actually brought us back to now the invest
yes.
bit of things.
Yeah, invest.
So unite and invest. And
yes.
invest. But Violet, what comes to mind for me is this begins much earlier if the woman is empowered, which means there is access to education, right? So she has access to education. She knows her reproductive rights. Yeah, so she's able to plan family planning, right? So all of this makes an impact where her empowerment is concerned. Therefore, she's less likely, in my view, to find herself in a situation where she's trapped. So this is it's an equality conversation, is it
yes.
not? Or do you agree or disagree? You know, you're the one who is on the ground, Violet.
Okay. Thank you, Olive. I totally agree. It's a holistic approach. When you look at women and girls, you have to have a holistic approach. And this has to start at the initial stage, where we look at what age are the girls enrolling to school. When the girls enroll to school, with all these challenges of poverty, of teenage pregnancy, are we able to retain them in class amidst those challenges? Then again, we look at transition. Are they able to transit from nursery? Now the syllabuses have changed, the CBC. Then we have to grade 6. Are they able to transition to junior high school? What are the challenges that they are facing along this enrollment, retention, and transition in school that will ensure this girl, by the time she becomes a teenager or an adult, she has power to speak, she can make her own decisions, she can be able to know what I want to do with my life in terms of economic pathway. Do I want to go to a TVET? Do I want to do a business? Do I want to look at my skills and build them for money. So because the world is changing. So for us at the community level, our biggest role is to work with communities, sensitize communities, the mothers and the fathers, to ensure if a girl is supposed to be at school at 4 years, then the girls and the boys in that community are actually in school at that age. If there are challenges of teen pregnancy along the way, we work with the community, talk to the community to be able to take care of the child and work with the schools so that they're able to accept the girls in school. There's a lot of stigma around it, yes, but we are still working around it in terms of sensitization. So it is holistic in terms of education. We've alluded to necessary child rights, where we have girls in schools who have given birth not falling again pregnant within the school system. So they have to have the reproductive rights sensitization. It should be comprehensive and also age appropriate in that matter. Then we look at mental health components. Are they able to make decisions? Whatever trauma that happens in their life, are they able to transit and lead a normal life? Then we look at the social norms that propagate violations of women and girls at the community level. The cultures like SGBV, issues around child marriage. We are able to sensitize community and transform the social norms so that they become positive aspects in ensuring women and future generation girls participate in decision-making processes. They are leaders in their own community so that they can be able to sit in decision-making processes and say, for the women and girls in this community, this is our experience. So that the government within those structures can be able to make informed decisions that are gender sensitive and will actually address the challenges of men, women, boys and girls at the community level. So I totally agree, it's holistic and it has to be looked from the process of when the children are born and through transition to adulthood. Yeah.
Okay, so we need to take a break, but when we come back, I'll still I want to get more into the invest part of things, and also where are we? You've already addressed, Arthur, some of the gaps that exist, safe spaces, for instance, Jackie, you as well. But you spoke about the gender working groups, where does the technical come in? Gender technical working groups. Where are they found? How can you reach them? How do they work? Yeah, so we'll come back with that on the other side of this break. I'll ask you, Violet, to hold on a little bit longer, especially because I want to address the funding issue before Elizabeth comes on. There is Elizabeth, who's working in these communities. She's a gender champion, and she will be speaking directly on the impact that these programs have, why it is important to fund them, on the other side of this break. Thank you for staying with us on AM Live. With me this morning, I have Arthur Okwemba, Executive Director, African Woman and Child Feature Service, who is in studio with me. I have Jackie Mbogo, and she is the party chief, remember me? Chief of Party, yes, Chief of Party Reinvent Program Kenya, that is reducing insecurity and violent extremism in northern and coastal regions of Kenya. We also have Sauti ya Wanawake Pwani CEO Violet Mbogo, who is coming to us from Pwani. And wait, who did you hear from last? Violet, right? And she was talking about the holistic approach, right, to this issue. So Arthur, and I'll come back to you on the legislation, but where are we missing it, Jackie? Because we have a robust, just based on the conversation we had during the break, we have a robust legislative framework. Even with this administration, the previous administration, there is actually political goodwill. Yeah, does it come down to shillings and cents? Because I ask this, in my research, I came across this data that, and this is according to the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, support to programs specifically dedicated to gender equality and women's empowerment as their principal objective remains consistently low. How would gender forecast, if we are deliberate in our funding to even the skills, what sort of impact do you think that would have?
So thank you very much. Gender responsive budgeting is an important component to this conversation. It is important because when you have gender responsive budget, first you begin to engender development, because this is also an issue of development. You provide resource to development areas that then respond to empowerment of women, to equality issues, but you also begin to look at what does the impact of development on society, particularly the most vulnerable. And therefore, it means then a portion of your budget must go towards services that directly relate to equality, to empowerment, to responding to SGBV. Now, it costs us, as I said, and I can't overemphasize this, it costs us when we do not put resource to prevention. A study was done by the National Gender and Equality Commission that put the figures down to about 25,000 per victim. So if someone is violated, it's going to cost them and their family about 25,000 to get help and support. Now, if you put that against the numbers of persons that we have as violated in this country, it comes to about 46 billion. That's about 1% of our GDP. That's huge, very, very huge. And all the more reason then to have a gender responsive budget, because then you begin to say, if it's draining us, if it's costing us as a country, how do we prevent it? How do we enhance empowerment? Because my colleagues have just said one of the critical factors for violation is disempowerment. When you have gender responsive budget, you push the bar for empowerment. Why is empowerment important? Because people begin to get agency. They can negotiate out of situations of violence. They can have a stake. If I go back to that woman, because her case is very, stark, she can negotiate if she's empowered. She can take control of her M-Pesa if she's empowered. She can get out and eke out a living if she had the education, if she had opportunities for employment, whether it is, small-scale employment or a business. She can do something for herself that would get her in the negotiating table, which enables to reduce the extent of violation. So that is important, and that happens if we then go back to the budget and say how much is going to education, because that is being gender responsive.
Yes.
And when we say education, how much is supporting girls to stay in school? Mm-hmm. How much is preventing child marriages? Mm-hmm. Because most of the cases would also be that somebody, actually attrition in school, teenage pregnancy is a big issue. Child marriage is a big issue. So how much of education budget is going towards preventing these issues? How much is going to getting teenage mothers back to school so that then they can have better outcomes of life? How much is of the budget is going towards maternal health? Because that is a big issue also, and a big cause of violence. So when we begin to disaggregate budgeting and we begin to say this amount of money should go to core services, that helps to empower women. It helps to reduce the incidences of violence, but it also brings the bar up for resiliency. Because once someone has gone through the cycle of violence, it's also important to say, how do they bounce back? How do they get back to productive self, that they are able then to contribute to the economy, but they're also thriving in life? The other aspect of budget is victim support. Mm-hmm. We do have a Victim Protection Act in the country, and that Victim Protection Act provides for support for the victim, including compensation, and these are victims of offenses. Gender-based violence is an offense because the Penal Code calls it so. So when we have a Victim Protection Act, it means such a woman, when she's aware of it, she can go for protection. She can also be compensated. The cost, this 24,025 we are talking about, can be borne by the state. But when you say borne by the state, then it's the taxpayer that is going to. So that's why, again, we go to what we said. The private is public. Because even if it was intimate partner violence, the fact that it's going to be borne by the victim protection services, it then means it's going to cost. And therefore, they need to circle back to what would it cost if we actually put budgets for prevention. because all this we can take away if we prevented in the first place. And prevention is the core services we are talking about. It's education. It's targeting the socializing factors. Socialization to violence is high. This is when communities, cultures, community lifestyles make it possible and acceptable for you to violate. So are we putting budgets towards that? What are the socialization agencies in the nation, in the communities that we can invest in so that once we transform them, then prevention happens? And all these other costs to addressing and dealing with violence then are wiped out, and we put it back to more meaningful areas of the economy. Yes.
All right. So Arthur, before I come to you, let me quickly ask Violet to tell us about the gender technical working groups. What sort of impact are they having? Where are they? You know, if I'm sitting here, I'm wondering, okay, if I needed help, then where do I turn? Where do I start?
Okay, thank you. The Gender Technical Working Group are structures that were born through the NGC, the National Gender Equality Commission, and also the State Department of Gender. At the national level, we have all actors, including the ones that I'm mentioning in the referral pathway. That is police, we have judiciary, we have CSOs or community CBOs that address violence against women and girls in the community level. We have children departments. So these are actors in one way or another. They will be in touch in terms of reporting, prevention, or mitigation. So at the county level, these structures have been devolved. So most counties have the county technical gender working group. However, within the technical gender working group, there are thematic areas that address different challenges at the community level. So, for example, there is the SGBV technical working group. There's the Women Economic Empowerment Technical Gender Working Group. Then there is the Women Peace and Security, Women Leadership, and then the last component that was recently added was the Male Engagement. So, depending on your priority areas, you join as an institution, and there are government actors, county government actors, and national government actors, and then the other development actors within that vicinity that sit to coordinate, discuss, interrogate hotspots of GBV issues that require awareness creation, and this informs a well-coordinated mechanism in terms of prevention and mitigation. But when it comes to response of GBV survivors, then that requires a different pathway, because this is more of a technical. It requires a different pathway that requires services directed to the survivor. So the first stop should be the health facility. So most counties, including Mombasa County through the Coast General, we have the GBVRC at the Coast General. So we need to create more awareness on this avenue. So the GBVRC, then it has to go to the police station, then follow the access to justice, and there's still components of psychosocial support, the safety, the rescue, and all that. So it is very comprehensive in terms of coordination, in terms of actors at the technical level. But for the survivor-centered, it is the referral pathway that directly meets the needs of the survivor at the point of when the violation happens.
All right. Even as far back as Kibaki, Arthur, you mentioned this, there was the 30% that was meant to go towards women and youth in terms of procurement opportunities. There was the Wezo Fund. There is not a gender manly. There is the Wezo Fund. There is now the Hustler Fund, and there was a pledge that 50 billion shillings would go to women, and I assume there will be said Mama Bogas at the 1-year anniversary celebration today. Which one am I forgetting? I'm forgetting one. Yes, Women Enterprise Fund. So it seems that there is an awareness how between on the interplay between financial empowerment, freedom, you know, and agency. You know, women having agency to determine what happens in their lives, their future, you know what I mean? So it seems already we have grasped this concept. Those in like I talked about the political goodwill, those who are in governance have grasped this. You took us as far back as 1984. 80, you know, 85.
When we started the conversation.
Exactly. So and Kenya is always noted for progressive legislative. Progressive laws and legislation and policy. So has there been a demonstrable impact on preventing SGBV?
I think one of the issues you are raising, and which is the elephant in the room in terms of addressing gender-based violence, is the whole issue of gender-responsive budgeting. Because one of the key components of effective mitigation or reducing significantly gender-based violence, you have to do proper budgeting.
And actually, sorry to disrupt your train of thought. You've brought to mind, this is now why we need more women at on the leadership table. It's all sort of tied in, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Go ahead,
so if you see, even if you look at that level, there are two key levels, at the national level and at the county level. At the county level, at the national level, we have the Public Finance Management Act, which advocates and expressly says in the provision, they have to be inclusivity in how you determine national resources will be used. That means the critical groups of the society, women and youth and men, they have to be involved in that process. So at national we have the public, then we have the CIDP, the County Integrated Development Plans, which are the starting process for you to make proper budgets. Because you have to plan, then you budget. One of the requirements is those frameworks, on paper, they advocate for inclusion of women in determining how the resources will be used. And that is very critical. And the critical aspect is this. If a woman is on the table, and we always say this, and sometimes men take it lightly, there's no way. There are issues, even as a man, I'll articulate on behalf of women, but there are issues women are better placed to articulate them. You know, there are issues where a woman is best to better articulate. Because they say the wearer of the shoes knows where the shoe pinches. And if you look at most of the counties and the national government, there is no effective participation of women in decision making at that level, in determining how county resources and national resources will be used. And hence the gap where you are seeing, for instance, there is little allocation towards sexual and gender-based violence programs, yet the problems are so bigger in those counties. So what some of those counties have done, and studies have shown, they come and pick their allies, or they come and pick from the grassroots women who are not vocal. So the issue is, yes, look at the participants list, we had 10 women, they participated. But the question is, have we gone beyond the numbers, 10? What was the contribution of those women in those processes? So the CIDP is experiencing that problem. So you find, yes, the women are on the decision making table, but are those women are they very empowered to articulate strongly for the rights and issues of women in that? So that's where we have the biggest gap. And then the other thing is, if you look at that processing, it says you have to involve women, women and men and youth in the planning process, in the budgeting process, in the implementation process, and the monitoring process. Most of the time, these categories, and especially women, you know, men are vocal, so they try to work with, they want to zima men. They say, okay, let's silence this guy, bring him on board. So the women, after participation, they have gone. It ends at that level. You are not, when they are making budgets, you are not there. When they are implementing, you are just seeing programs being implemented. And then when monitoring comes, you are not seeing. The next thing you see is media reporting. that this county has done this there's corruption, then a woman is asking, but we propose these projects and programs. Why are we not hearing that they are part of what the county has implemented? So that is the biggest gap we need to address. Effective and meaningful participation of women in determining how resources will be allocated and which programs. For instance, why you see these counties, they have tools. And I think as you asked the first question, there's just lack of political will. Some agencies have led. If you look at UN Women, it has led in providing these counties with tools, gender-responsive budgeting tools. If you look at FCD or the Foreign Commonwealth, it works also with the organization that have provided tools. So we don't have insufficiency of tools. We have. But the thing is, when these counties look at certain issues, they think, women will not make a noise. They invest where they think first, it benefits them, and areas they think, if we don't do here, there will be a lot of noise. Lastly, some counties, they don't invest in issues around gender-based violence for political reasons. I can give you example of especially counties that do a lot of FGM. We have been in those counties, and politicians will never want to speak. Like we were in Samburu, if you go to Garissa, if you go to these counties, FGM is determined as a cultural issue. And one of the markers of success for those politicians is not supporting, is not condemning FGM. Yes. So you find this very politician who has not condemned FGM is elected now. He sits at the heart of decision making, how resources will be done, what will be shared. Do you think he'll allocate resources to education and awareness on reducing FGM? They will not, because they think they will not be elected in the next election. But that theory was collapsed by Lina Chebi. Remember, she was strongly against FGM, but still she was elected. So I think there is just lack of political will in these counties, and at the national level, we are seeing a lot of progress. We are still struggling, especially at county levels. There are counties which are doing very well, and we congratulate them in terms of addressing these issues. But investment is an issue we have to look at. Let me tell you, if you look at, I think there are about 6 key areas: gender equality and women empowerment, education in women, livelihoods, you have awareness and advocacy, you have shelters and rescue centers, and you have implementation of the legal frameworks. All those 6 areas, they require massive investment. So there is need to be a political will, people who believe there is direct linkage in terms of lower development index, both at the national and county levels, and high sexual and gender-based violence against women. Once at the national level and at the county level, that thing hits home, you will see more resources being allocated. So we need a lot of advocacy and awareness. And remember, under the prevention pillar, in terms of integration, awareness and advocacy becomes critical. Because some of the women, for instance, they don't know even they can make a decision at county level how the resources are used. There is a lot of ignorance. So we need awareness that some of them do not know how to access justice. Even what my colleague was talking and Violet in terms of the shelters and all these other frameworks, they don't know. And that's where the media, us in the media, we come in very critical, that there's a social responsibility we have in media helping reduce this at the prevention and management level. All right. Yes. So
I would like us to hear from Elizabeth, and I baptized Violet, sorry. Violet, CEO, Sauti ya Wanawake Pwani, Violet Muthiga. Sorry about that, Violet. But so she's given way to Elizabeth Mkongo, who is a gender champion. Elizabeth, unafanya kazi na Sauti ya Wanawake Pwani. Labda tueleze umuhimu ya Sauti ya Wanawake Pwani, inafanya kazi gani huko Pwani?
Majina naitwa Elizabeth Mkongo. umuhimu wa sauti ya wanawake Pwani kwa wanawake ni kuwaelimisha kujua haki zao na kujua wakati watoto wamekuwa defiled ama wamekuwa sodomized, wajue kufuatiliza cases na wajue kutetea watoto, pia wajue kujitetea pia wao. Huo ndio muhimu wa sauti ya wanawake Pwani, kuelimisha jamii kama kwa ujumla.
Haya, na sijui kama ulipatana na Queen Camilla. Najua nilimwona Jackie akiwa huko walipokuwa Mombasa. Ulikutana naye, labda ulimwambia nini?
Nilikutana naye, meza yangu ilikuwa ya kwanza. Niliweza kumwambia tuko na toll free number yenye tunapokea cases. Hiyo toll free number ni 0800-720-587. Tunapokea simu kupitia hiyo namba, na imesaidia wengi jamii, imesaidia hata wanaume wameweza kujifungua, ambapo hapo mbeleni wanaume walikuwa hawaripoti cases. Lakini tulipopata hiyo toll free number, wanaume waliweza kujifungua na wanaweza kufuatilia haki zao, pia wameweza kujua kutetea watoto wao. Kwa hivyo Queen nilikutana naye, hata nikasalimiana naye kwa mkono na nikamweleza jinsi tunavyofuatilia hizo kesi zetu.
Kwa hivyo najua tumeongelea mambo mengi kuhusu wanawake na wasichana. Kwa hivyo unatuambia tusisahau pia wanaume?
Tusisahau pia wanaume, kwa pia watoto wetu wa kiume wanakuwa sodomized. So tukiwasahau, hao wanaume ndio wanafanya hivyo vitendo. Kwa hivyo pia tunawaelimisha ili wajue ubaya wao.
Aya, labda tuambie, umesema kuna toll free number mwenye watu wanaweza piga simu. Toll free yenye inamaanisha haikuli credit. Hivyo ndo naelewa hiyo toll free.
Hiyo toll free haikuli credit. Ukipiga popote ulipo tunawasiliana, na kama kuna shida tunakufuata. Kama ni mtoto amekuwa defiled ama raped, tunamfuata paka mahali alipo. Kwanza ukipiga simu tunakuelezea usimbadilishe nguo, usimuoshe, mwache hivyo, na kama itabidi badilishwe nguo uzifunge na karatasi ya kaki, na tukifika tunamchukua mtoto tunamkimbiza hospitali. Kwa hivyo toll free number inasaidia sana na ni ya bure, tunaelimisha ni ya bure. Hata tulikuwa na van campaign kuzunguka ili watu wengi wapate kujua kuna toll free number yenye ni bure, wakipata matatizo waweze kutupigia simu tupatane nao.
Haya, na labda tuelezee kuongezea sasa hiyo toll free number, mnawasaidia kivipi kuendelea mbele sasa?
Wakipiga toll free number, kwa mfano ni mtoto amekuwa defiled ama sodomy, tunashirikiana, wanatuambia mahali walipo ni wapi, na tunawaelezea wasivue mtoto nguo ama wasimuoshe. Tukifika tunachukua mtoto pamoja na mzazi, tunaenda DRC ambapo ni Coast General Hospital. Mtoto anaonekana na daktari, PRC form inajazwa, anaingizwa kwa counseling. Akitoka hapo ndio tunaenda kwa police station kwenda kuripoti ili tupate OB number na kesi iwe reported. Alafu tukiwa hapo polisi pia tunapigia children officer simu ili ajue, kwa sababu saa nyingine hizi cases mtoto anakuwa ako defiled na jamii, hata mzazi wake anaweza kufanya ama ndugu yake. So tukipigia children officer, yeye ndio atatusaidia mahali atapeleka mtoto mahali pa usalama, kwa sababu mtoto anahitaji kuwa salama. So tukitoka hapo tunarudi tena police station, tunakuja hospitali tujaziwe P3 form, na tunaambia wazazi wanyamaze. Kwa hili jambo la defilement ama rape si la kusemwa kila mtu ajue. Yule perpetrator akijua atakimbia. So tunaambia mzazi avumilie, japo ni uchungu, avumilie, tupate process mpaka tumshike huyo jamaa. Na tukishamshika tunafatana na jamii kwenda kotini sasa. Na tukienda kotini tutakuwa pamoja na mzazi, kuzi mambo ya kotini jamii sana hawaelewi na hawasikii, kwa jaji wanaongea polepole. Sasa huwa tunafatana naye, tunasikiza, mahali hakusikia tunamuelezea. Sasa nyingine mzazi anaweza kwenda iko kotini, kumbe kesi iko court number 1 ama number 2, yeye amekaa tu pale hajui kesi iko wapi. Sasa tunafatana naye, tunaangalia kwa signboard, tunamwambia kama kesi ni court number 1, tunaingia naye, tunakaa, tunasikiza. Na wakati kesi inaendelea, na tukiona huyu mama ama mzazi wa mtoto hajatendewa haki, huwa tuna uhuru wa kunyosha mkono, na jaji akatuliza ni shida gani, kwa tukamwelezea hapa tunaona hii kesi haiendi vizuri, tunapewa tarehe nyingine. Na wakati tumepewa tarehe nyingine tukirudi, Still tukiona mambo hayaendi vizuri, tuko chapters nyingi, huwa tunaitana wanawake, tunakusanyana, tunavaa t-shirt zetu, tunakuwa kotini kwa wingi. Kesi ikitajwa tukiingia kwa wingi, judge anajua hii kesi inawafatiliza. So tunafatiliza mpaka tuhakikishe haki imepatikana.
Na hao wanawake unafanya kazi nao, unawasaidia, nini wanachosema wanahitaji sana sana?
Sana sana kile wanahitaji wakati wa kwenda kotini, saa nyingine wanasema hawana transport. Sasa tukifika pale, waenda kotini ufike amechelewa. Lakini vile tunajua kesi yetu, hii kesi yetu ikitajwa, nanyosha mkono na mwambia huyo yuko njiani yuaje. So hata andikwa warrant of arrest. Kwa ukiwa kotini, kesi ikitajwa huku fika, utaandikiwa warrant of arrest. Sasa tukiwa pale tunatanguliaga mapema sana. So tukiwa pale kesi ikitajwa, tunaingia, tunasema huyu client wetu yuko njiani yuaje.
And I can imagine for you to get to court, you have to leave whatever it is you are doing, and many times income generating activity to be there for hours for a case to be had. Ungependa kuambia wanawake wanaosikiza, wanaume wanaosikiza nini kuhusu hii mambo ya SGBV?
Mimi ningependa kuambia wakati wamekuwa na kesi za SGBV wasikose kwenda kotini. Kwa sababu wakikosa kwenda kotini, kesi ikitajwa hawako, itapewa tarehe na hawatajua tarehe ngapi. Na sana sana polisi hatuwategemei kukumbusha mtu wako na kesi nyingi, na saa nyingine wanasahau. Saa nyingine watasema ni jeuri wao. So huwa tunawahimiza mtu akiwa na kesi ya SGBV tafadhali asikose kwenda kotini ili tupate tarehe inayofuata. Ukikosa kupata tarehe inayofuata, kesi hapo ndio yaharibika, maana tarehe ikifika hujui, tarehe ikifika hujui. Perpetrator atasema mimi naja kotini kila siku naharibu muda wangu na hakuna mlalamishi. So inakuwa na uwezekano wa kutupwa. Lakini wakati tunaenda kila siku na wao wanaenda, sisi ni support yetu. Wakati wanaenda kila siku ndio tunapata date na tunakuwa na nguvu ya ufuatilizi. Kila jambo linapoendelea tunajua kunaenda vipi.
Okay. Shukran, Elizabeth. Your last words, Jackie and Arthur, on this subject, if you're able, 30 seconds each.
Maybe I will highlight the visit by Her Majesty, which you did talk about. That was very, very important because first it places the issues on a global platform. It also spurs domestic action, and at the national level, her coming first was demonstrated that the need to center survivors in our approaches, in our development efforts, but the need to afford them dignity and cost-effective or affordable services. It also demonstrated the need to end the stigma around the issues, because we know that stigma is one of the biggest challenges where people don't want to talk about it. Politically, we also don't want to talk about it. But her coming and highlighting the issues and visiting the Tononoka Center was important, because then we begin to say the silence is broken. People can talk about these issues. Men can also visit the center, and she has just talked about men being violated also. They can visit the center. In fact, about 30% of the people that call into the center are actually male. So they need to lift that lead also on male violence. They need to lift the lead on elder violence, because women, older women are also violated. And the silence is big, the stigma is big. So for me, that the coming was important. On the funding aspect, the FCDO is supporting all these programs, but they need to call for more funding, especially even at the national government level and at community county level, because if we sustain funding to services, especially on prevention and response, I think we can win this war. It is not impossible, we can. And my parting shot, it is expensive to cure violence. How about if we invest in prevention? I think we'd win as a nation.
Okay, thank you for that, Jackie. Arthur, your last word?
Okay, very quickly, first I want to say there is hope in terms of addressing violence against women and girls. And I can tell you, we have a very good legal and policy framework. We just need to implement it. We have seen there is a very good working relationship for the first time between National Police Service and civil society organization in terms of allowing us to access and work with them in addressing these issues. Because I think through Reinvent program, we have trained more than more than 400 police officers on just how to manage violence against women and girls. There is a court users committee. We had times you will have talked about it. The structure, a very critical structure, because it brings even the judiciary into there. All players are there, development partners, court users committee. Then there is a standard operating procedures that guides the police and other actors on how to better manage women experiencing violence. And then lastly, there is Kenya National Action Plan. So you see, there is hope. We have the legal and policy framework to move forward. But my recommendation, just as we end in the next, you say 30 seconds, is we need to invest and invest and invest more in the following areas very quickly. Effective integration, where we need to bring the National Police Service, the media, development partners, and state and other state and actors to bring resources together to address this. The other one is the improved resourcing of SGBV, and it ties to the first one. Another critical one is the male involvement. We have to bring men on board to involve this. There is invest in shelters, we have said. Another critical area is forensic services. The reason why many women don't access justice and it takes too long and they give up, you find that most of forensic, the key forensic lab is in Nairobi. You have been violated more than 600 kilometers.
That's an important one.
Yes.
That's an important one.
Yes. That sample has to come from there to Nairobi. We need to decentralize this forensic and ensure that even those at the county levels are more effective. Okay. And women have access to that. Then the other important thing.
I hope it's the last one because.
It's the last one.
Yeah.
It's the last capacity assessment, research and awareness. She has spoken. Okay. If you look at the issues you have raised, is issues around advocacy and awareness. We need to invest more in that. Right. So for me is investment.
All right, yes. So the conversation continues. We are here until the 10th of December. But just what you said as we conclude, what you said about older women, it actually shows why a holistic approach is important, because services to prevent and respond to violence often target adolescent women and women of reproductive age, leaving older women out of the reach and sight of help and other service providers. Deeply rooted prejudices and stereotypes about older people fuel ageism and perpetuate prevailing social norms that tolerate violence in older age. I have hair that was coming to my mouth. But usually this is because of historical injustices, lack of access to education and physical empowerment. I will have to end the conversation there, but allow me to thank my panelists who have joined this morning. Jackie Mbogo, who is the Chief of Party Reinvent Program, Arthur Kwemba, ED, African Woman and Child Feature Service, CEO, Sauti ya Wanawake Pwani, Violet Muthiga, I keep mixing up these names, Elizabeth Mkongo, Gender Champion. Shukran sana, Elizabeth. Coming up, prevention of antimicrobial resistance on Your World.